friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and today we are unpacking 5 of the top bullshit money lies that are keeping you stuck in the paycheck to paycheck cycle. Listen, with the age of the internet, and especially with TikTok, which no hate, because like literally TikTok is why I'm here. I love TikTok for many reasons, but there is also a lot of sketchy information out on there. And I actually do have a video coming up where I am breaking down some of the videos and the advice that I've seen on TikTok, and some of it is quite interesting, but it got me thinking about like some of those bigger pieces of advice in the personal finance world that I feel like I disagree with. And I want to speak out against why. I want to talk to you about like where I'm coming from, what I think about these, and why a lot of these pieces of advice are keeping you stuck, kind of feeling like you're never going to get out of debt or reach your savings goals or get to where you want to be financially. Of course, like every other video that is up on my page, I recognize that personal finance is personal, and some of these tips might have actually worked really well for you. You might agree with them, and that is totally okay. If you are doing what works for you and I would generally disagree with it, as long as it's not hurting anyone else, then that is totally fine and you should keep doing it. But I do think that these are pieces of advice that I hear just kind of thrown around in the personal finance space that I think need to be unpacked. And we need to talk about why people think that they're the best route to go, because in a lot of situations, they might not actually be the best for everyone. And we are covering everything today. We are talking about investing lies, spending lies, saving lies, and debt payoff lies. We even talk about credit scores, so really we're hitting everything. So if you enjoy this video, you learned something cool, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content, and let's go ahead and get into it. Bullshit money lie number 1. Throw every penny that you have toward debt. Now there's one main like spearhead of this idea, and I'm sure if you've been around here at all, you probably know exactly who I'm talking about and probably know right off the bat why I disagree with it. But I really want to unpack this idea because I do think that a lot of people believe that if you have debt, especially high interest debt, that it's a waste of money for you to be keeping a savings when you're really not making that much money off of your savings account, even if it's a high yield savings account, but you could be spending a lot of money and interest on some of that high interest debt. And I totally understand like the viewpoint of that thinking. And it's really common that people feel like they need to rush toward debt freedom and paying off of all their debt. That way they're not wasting money on interest and losing money to the credit card companies, which I think is a totally valid feeling. But I also think it's important to recognize that your feelings about something in personal finance might be valid, but it might not be the most rational decision when you break it down. So let's unpack why I don't think it's necessarily a good idea that you throw all of your extra money toward debt. What can happen whenever you start sacrificing your savings account to throw that extra money toward debt is that you leave yourself in a really vulnerable position. I've talked about this concept when we have touched on emergency funds. I touched on it in my video about when to not pay off debt, and also when I was talking about sinking funds as well. I can totally see how it might seem like the rational decision to put money toward a credit card. That way you don't have to be paying interest on that credit card, especially if it's a credit card with really high interest and you've got a lot of it. But it's really important that you look at all of your goals in the whole picture, because what can so easily happen when we put any extra money that we have toward debt is that we are left in a position where if an emergency happens or an unexpected expense comes up or we forgot about an expense, we're left with no money to be able to pay for that expense, which means we're either left just not having the money that we need, or we are having to take on debt to pay for that expense, which could leave us paying more in interest than we were paying in the first place. And not only does it undo all of the hard work that we have done to pay off that debt, but it can also feel like really defeating. And I feel like that cycle is what stops people from continuing to move forward and continuing to budget, because it just feels like no matter what you're doing, you're following the steps that prominent figureheads in the personal finance community are telling you to follow, but you're just always behind and something unexpected always comes up and derails your goals. And my goal whenever I am teaching you all about personal finance is to stop that from happening. Because I am a big believer that personal finance and budgeting and saving is not a sprint. It is a marathon, and it is something that you should establish small, realistic changes and accomplish realistic goals rather than cutting everything back that you possibly can for a short period of time. And then you're left with no debt, but you don't know where else to go from there. Bullshit money lie number 2, don't invest until you are debt free. I hear this so often, and I had internalized this for the longest time. Even when I was really into personal finance and the budgeting community, and I was saving all of this money and I had started to pay off my credit card debt, I viewed investing as something that I didn't have to worry about until the future. Future you, future Lexa could focus on investing. It wasn't something that I needed to concern myself with right now. And looking back, I so wish I would have started sooner than I did. And I'm really glad that I actually just ran across a video about M1 Finance and decided to look into investing and decided to kind of dip my toes into that world, because it's so important. And I didn't even realize at the time that time is one of your biggest assets when it comes to investing. So the sooner that you start, the better. So I truly believe that you don't always have to wait until you're debt free to start investing. I think that there's a balance to be had. And it might sound backward, or it might be kind of like a hot take, but I also don't think that you need to wait until you've paid off your credit cards to start investing. I definitely don't think it's a good idea to throw any extra money you have toward investing rather than your credit cards, because 99% of the time you are paying more in interest on your credit cards than you're going to make by investing. But I really think that there is value to establishing a routine of investing that you can carry throughout your life. And I think that you can and should start that at any time, even if you're in debt. You don't have to throw tons of money into an investment account, but just establishing those automatic payments, getting that account set up, and getting into a routine of investing for future you can be priceless. And it can be the difference between having money to retire on and not. Bullshit money lie number 3, credit scores don't matter. Again, Dave Ramsey, we are looking at you for this one. There are certain tips in personal finance that I think are just kind of I might disagree with them, but they're harmless. If you want to go with that mindset, that's totally fine. But when it comes to this money lie in particular, I actually think that this can be a really harmful one to be kind of instilling in people. So of course, Dave Ramsey's platform is based on the idea that being debt-free should be the #1 goal that you have, and that therefore, if you are debt-free, he says that credit scores shouldn't matter, they are shitty anyway, they're a stupid fucked system, and you shouldn't worry about them because you could just buy everything in cash. And while I do understand where he's coming from, because I agree that the credit score system is fucked. I don't agree with the system, but I don't think that I need to agree with the system to recognize that playing into the system is important, especially for marginalized individuals. The reality of it is that most people, it could take decades, if not an entire lifetime, to be able to be debt-free and pay for everything in cash. And that's just not a reality that most people are going to be able to live in. And because of that, I think that, in my opinion, it's really important as people in the personal finance space that we need to give everyone the resources that they need to navigate the system as best as they possibly can, while also recognizing the systems that are in place to make it difficult, if not impossible, for some people to build wealth. And one of those things is understanding the importance of credit scores. And while I don't necessarily agree with how credit scores are calculated or how they are used, I do recognize that it is factually incorrect to say that credit scores don't matter if you're debt-free and can pay for everything in cash, because there are so many situations where credit scores can make a huge difference. It could be between you getting an apartment or not, you getting a good rate on insurance, you getting a job, even though they don't check credit scores, but they can check your credit report. And for people who just cannot afford to pay for things in cash, it could be the difference between like hundreds or thousands of dollars in interest. I talked a lot more in depth about credit scores and all that they entail, how to navigate them, why they're important in this video. I also have a reaction video to Dave Ramsey's rant about credit scores, and I went into some of those points as well. I will link them up here and also in the description box down below if you want to learn more. But all in all, I think it's really irresponsible to tell people as a personal finance creator and someone who they are looking to for financial advice and education that credit scores don't matter if you are trying to pursue debt freedom, because the reality of it is, for many people, they can make a big difference to their life and also to their finances. So while I don't think credit scores are like the end all be all, I don't think they have any like bearing on your worth as a human being, I do recognize their importance, and I think it's important to talk about situations where credit scores do matter. Bullshit money lie number 4, investing is gambling. I actually hadn't heard of this lie and this concept before I got into the personal finance space and started talking about investing. But whenever I started talking about retirement investing, I got tons of comments from people really concerned about what would happen to their money if they put it in the stock market, if they invested. A lot of people saying that they didn't want to do that because they were afraid to lose all of their money. And the more that I looked into it, the more I realized that there is this narrative that investing is really risky and it's something that you shouldn't do if you don't, like, if you are completely risk averse. And that's not the case. Yes, there are tons of types of investing that are really risky. Throwing your entire life savings into Dogecoin, that is gambling. That is very risky. That is very valid to say that form of investing is gambling. But I honestly think that is closer to true gambling than it is closer to true investing. Investing does not need to be a scary gamble. There have been studies that have shown that if you are investing in diversified funds for the long run, meaning you are consistently putting money into an investment account and you are investing in not just like one stock or one cryptocurrency, but lots of different things, that over time, your risk is minimal, if not non-existent. I don't want to go into like huge rants about investing because that's not what this whole video is about. Again, if you want to know more about how to invest in a way that is not so risky, I will link my investing videos down below. But just know that there are ways to invest that do not have to be a gamble, that minimize your risk to nearly, if not completely, zero. And last but not least, bullshit money lie number 5, all debt is bad. This actually kind of really ties back well with our point number 3, which was not investing when you're in debt. And the idea that you shouldn't invest when you're in debt comes from this idea that no matter what debt you're in, all debt is bad. And while there are debts that are not ideal, like high interest credit card debt or high interest personal loans, especially payday loans, we can all agree that that's not the best way for our money to be spent on paying interest to these big companies. And while that is true, that does not mean that all debt has to be bad. And I actually think this narrative that all debt is bad and cash is king and you should pay for everything in cash can harm people in the long run, because I think that it can stop a lot of people from pursuing the things that they want to pursue and meeting the financial goals that are important to them. Because let's be honest here, funding a house in cash is out of reach for a lot of people. Funding an entire education in cash is out of reach for a lot of people. And the reality of it is that these debts are very low interest, meaning that they're not necessarily bad investments. This point is a little bit more nuanced because it is going to vary depending on what your goals are, your income situation, your debt, all of that. But in my opinion, a blanket statement that all debt is bad is just false. There are valid reasons for you to take on debt that can end up being a really good investment for you. Even if they're not necessarily a monetary investment, they can provide a lot of value for your life in other ways. I've talked on TikTok and also on Instagram about Liz and I not wanting to own a home and how homes are often not the investment that people think that they're going to be. But I've also talked about how that doesn't really matter, because if you want a home, if that is something that is going to bring a lot of intrinsic value to your life, then it is a good investment. It might not necessarily be a good monetary investment, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good investment in your life. And I feel that about a lot of things in personal finance. But there are actually tons of scenarios where debt isn't actually costing you that much money. Like I had mentioned in my scenario, yes, I have student loans, but all of them are really low interest. Most of my student loans are around 4%, all of them are under 6%. So by just paying the minimum payments and then putting the rest of that extra money I would be putting toward those loans toward investing instead, I'll actually make myself a lot more money in the long run. So do I like student loans? No. Do I think that the system is ethical? No. But do I think that my student loans were a bad investment? Also, no. I think that they were both a monetary investment, because had I stuck with the career that I was in, I doubled my income basically overnight by getting my master's degree. And I do think that that was a really good investment. But also, I loved college. I loved learning. I think that I learned so much from the education that I got through taking out those student loans. And yes, there are things that I would have done differently, but I do think that they brought a lot of value to my life. And now they're continuing to bring me monetary value because I can leverage those loans by just paying back the minimum payments and investing that money I would be spending instead. I just really feel like it's important, as someone who is coming into this space as a personal finance content creator, to talk about your other options other than just being debt-free, because debt freedom is a really big focal point in this side of the internet. And I just want you to know that there are other options and other goals that you can be considering as well. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video and you learned something cool. If you did, please remember to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content. And I will see you all next time.